pause when it starts.
Okay.
Alright, I'm clicking it. Should be going live. It says we're live.
Cool.
Real good. I tried to turn the mic up because some people said that the audio was bad last time. The mic is quite far away from where we're sitting, so that, just out of necessity. So
Yeah, I mean, it's designed to be far away.
yeah, I don't know. There was only one person, so maybe that guy just had bad speakers. But
I guess in the pause.
I'm sorry if it is quiet. We won't be shouting or anything because this is supposed to be a comfy time, evening together.
Apparently.
Yeah. We're wearing our Christmas jumpers, also featured in my Hogfather readings. You see, they're matching, but not. They're
Thematically.
They're thematically matching, but not actually matching.
Literally.
You refuse to wear anything that would actually be the same.
Well, I still probably wouldn't wear it outside.
Yeah. Well, you have worn it outside, just not when I'm wearing mine.
Would I wear it outside?
We had to decide who was going to be cheapo and who was going to be finest.
Oh, because this is the larger one.
Yeah, it is the large one. That is true. Still, I do like wearing things that are too big. Anyway, when we should get into it, I introduced the concept for this stream in the end of my last video, but not everyone will have seen that, so I'll introduce it again. The idea of the memory hole, I'm hoping it'll be a yearly tradition, but it's a stream where we discuss the news of this year that was forgotten by the media and by the population at large.
And by us.
And by you and I. Possibly, by design or by neglect, or, just to introduce the idea of the memory hole. It was first coined
1984.
In 1984.
Not the year.
The novel by George Orwell, where the protagonist, it's his job to erase information from the past, and every time that he discards a little bit of information,
well, his job is to erase. No, I'm nipping in.
Yeah,
His job is to erase and replace.
Yeah, and the stuff that gets erased, it goes down a little waste disposal unit that is next to his desk, which is called the memory hole.
Does he call it the memory hole, or is
it's actually called that?
Okay.
Officially in the novel, and it's obviously that is not exactly what's going on in mainstream media. They don't literally go back and change history in the way that he does in the novel. But George Orwell did work at the BBC at the time he wrote that novel, apparently, and that was back then. And the idea is that the stories that enter the public consciousness and the things that we remember, there's an organic nature to it in the sense of what stays in people's minds, what people talk about. But then there is also a kind of design to it where the people who write articles, they can choose which things to highlight, which things to bring up again and again.
Not everyone reports on the news. There's a small, very small subsection of the world that actually writes the news, and those people are not, I don't know, charitably you could say that they're not completely representative of everyone else's views, opinions and philosophies that are outside of that small percentage that report the news. And because of that unrepresentative nature, what they like or what they think is worth reporting is not the same as the wider population think is worth reporting.
But this is not as simple as that, because these are all stories that were reported and were quite heavily reported at the time, but then were just never referenced again, or were never, we never heard about them afterwards. There was never any follow-up that was widely broadcast.
There's a spectrum that people, I mean, there's like, some people consider it to be like something that was barely mentioned and completely memory hole, and like no one ever talked about it, or stuff that was widely talked about that was also just dumped out.
Okay.
I mean that's the thing I was talking about, is that like the reason why reporters do this is most likely because of the fact that what they are finding interesting and what they think is useful for the wider population to know may not be representative of what the wider population actually would like to hear more of.
there doesn't have to be an explicit conspiracy or an agenda. It's just, well, it could be, but it's not necessary for the memory hole phenomenon to exist.
No, yeah. I mean, it's a very complicated series of interdependent factors that determine what gets reported and re-reported over and over again. Yeah, obviously, bias comes into it sometimes. There's no way the reporters can't help but report some stuff that is huge news, but it's hard to know, how much control they have over it. The Dominic Cummings thing where they were pushing it into the news and then people were getting upset about it, which generated more justification for them to put it in the news. Was that a true representation?
Was it an organic outrage or was it manufactured outrage?
Yeah.
Should we get into it? I've got a few. It might be logical to start at the beginning of 2020, the longest time ago. There's a logic to that. And the first one I've got, it's pretty simple. The bushfires in Australia. Something I always forget is that Australia's seasons are backwards, so the coldest part of our year is the hottest part of their year.
Yeah.
And in January this year, they had those fires that were, wiping out a lot of their woodlands, and lots of koala bears died.
Yeah.
I gather. That was a kind of a really big deal, and a lot of people included that in their list of reasons why 2020 is a hellscape. At the start of the year, when the pandemic stuff was just kicking off, people were including bushfires in their list of things that make 2020 really awful. But
Yeah.
I kind of forgot about it for the last 6 months. I don't think I've thought about it at all.
If you're trying to create a narrative, whether it's the narrative true or not, you're always looking for if you go, 2020 was a terrible year, you can always find stuff that fits that and makes it so.
There's usually forest fires somewhere in the world every year.
Yeah.
But I think
it's a very dramatic visual.
Yeah,
if you want to illustrate that.
I think people were upset about the Australian ones because of the cute koala bears, and there's a lot of footage of animals losing their habitat and getting way too hot. And
yeah, I mean the forest fires thing is always how much of that is a manufactured story versus how much of it is just normal. It's rare. It's rare when they report these things they actually put any stats up. As far as
any context.
Yeah, a proper in depth. I mean, they do put stats up. They're somewhat selective, or
Oh yeah.
That's not what they're leading with. They're leading with fires and blah blah and this and worst ever. Yeah, that's what sells.
Yeah, I was going to say that I've only got a few stories here because by the nature of it's the stories that we can't remember because we've forgotten about them. So this is not a comprehensive list, and I'm hoping that the chat will be posting their own stories that they remembered or that they remember they forgot.
Yeah, Kim Jong-un's health, that was an interesting one.
Yeah.
Did that even get resolved? Because as far as I remember it was...
He hasn't been seen on film.
He wasn't seen at all, and then he was seen, but then somebody said that was actually just filmed earlier and reshown or something. And then COVID happened, so I don't know. I don't know if he's actually been seen since this, for the whole of this year. I haven't even thought about that. So that was memory hole, definitely.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Although perhaps it was just memory hole because it was resolved, and then all the people who said he was dead looked a bit embarrassed.
Well, it was definitely a story because he didn't attend some particular ceremony that was no head of state for North Korea had not attended it ever, and he wasn't there, and they didn't. It was he obviously had something going on, and they were looking. And one of the things was that it'd be dead, and they hadn't reported it. But
do you remember that his sister was hot in a kind of villainous way?
Yes.
They were saying she was going to take over.
Yeah, they were hyping her up as to be the new leader. I mean, she probably still is definitely in the running.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what their gender politics are like. Maybe her being a woman would preclude that.
As far as I understand it, you need legitimacy for the head of state. So they need because the head of state is the dead president. That he's like the god emperor of North Korea, and his son is like the head of the parliament or whatever. I can't remember what it was, but like that's why Kim Jong Un has got a haircut like his granddad. Like they've dressed him up to look a lot like his granddad. So like it's very important that whoever's the head of North Korea is like a blood relative of the original North Korean dictator Kim Jong Un.
Kim Jong Il was Kim Jong Un's father. I don't know. Kim Jong Sung?
Maybe, yeah. Either way, that's why they had before when Thingy was getting sick. The previous one, there was a lot of debate about who would take him over because
Kim Il Sung? Sorry.
Yeah, that doesn't matter. But yeah, they need legitimacy. They're going to take over. So she is very likely, if anything happened or if they wanted to replace him, she is definitely high up in the nomination. That's why he killed the other one a few years ago. His brother was killed in the airport by that woman wearing the LOL shirt.
That's a good memory hole, but it's not from this year, so it wasn't included.
It wasn't that memory hold. I think it was such a bizarre thing. The PPE thing. I mean, that was
Well, I think all of COVID stuff kind of gets in. COVID is on everyone's mind, so I kind of feel like everything that's COVID related cannot really, it can't fall into the memory hole. It's immune from it being memory hole because everyone is.
Yeah, I mean they definitely memory hold at least the wider population about the sort of
the masks.
The masks at the
We're
start.
going to talk about the masks. Yeah.
The start, it was a very sort of clear thing. I mean, I know why. It is consistent. The old story versus the new story.
Do you want to sum it up for those who don't remember?
Initially, people were buying loads of masks, and the government was saying, "Don't buy masks because they're not that effective, and we need them for frontline users. And if there's a shortage, we won't be able to give the frontline users who need them the most." And they had a lot of things.
There's a lot of information saying that the mask won't actually protect you.
Yeah, it's not that effective. Blah blah blah. In some cases, it wouldn't help you at all. Really, if you're not interacting with sick people, it's not worth wearing one. And I mean, all of what they were saying was true, and then they kind of 180'd on that.
Well, masks became mandatory in the UK for all.
Yeah, but basically the supply. The thing that changed is that those original facts are still true.
Masks are no longer in shortage, though.
Yeah, so the very marginal effect that masks have to restrict the virus are now worth applying to the wider populace. There's an argument that you can make that says that it's worth requesting or ordering, as they are actually doing.
We're not saying necessarily that it's ethical or it's not, but it's effective at least. It could be effective.
It's minimally effective. It's about as close to minimal as you can get, and still be effective.
Okay. Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that it is kind of remarkable how quickly the ramp up in manufacture of masks has been. And it's one of those things. No one reports on that. It's just for a while you couldn't get masks for love nor money, and now they're in every shop, loads of them. There's no shortage of masks. I don't know who's manufacturing these. Is it the same people, or is it new companies who've started developing masks?
They're not exactly sophisticated technology.
Yeah, I just think it's impressive. The market's doing their job. People just there's money in masks, so make masks.
It was just that period of no one wanted masks were a medical device used in a few places in some situations. To the entire population needed multiple masks, every week.
So speaking of that, actually, ramping up in supply. One of the things I had on my list was the testing. Do you remember back in spring, whenever it was, and the government said we're going to make Can you look it up? Because I want to get the number right. They said that we're going to make like
I bet you can't find it.
1,000 tests a day, 10,000 tests a day or something. They said we're going to hit this number of tests per day by the end of the month. And then it got like close to the end of that month, and all of the press and all of the DJs on the radio they're making fun of the government, saying there's no way they haven't even got to they haven't even got half of that yet, and they said they're gonna ramp up to this number by the end of the month, and it's impossible. And it was hilarious because in the space of like 6 days, they actually did it. They managed it in the space of a week. It was a huge ramp up, and by the end of the month, they were hitting their target. And it was back in those days. I remember in my opinion of the government, the Conservative government, Boris Johnson, the way they were running things, it wasn't quite as bad as it is now. So the fact that the fact that they had succeeded against all odds, and in spite of all of the media saying it was impossible, it was a moment of triumph for me, at least. It felt like a small victory.
Yeah, so it was
100,000 daily UK coronavirus tests target.
And then that is a brilliant illustration of like how the media is unaccountable to itself.
Yeah.
Because they can always hide behind the fact they never said that they couldn't do it. The media never specifically says the government is wrong on this and they won't be able to do it. They give time to people to say that, and they might ask a snarky question, and they might put emphasis on the fact that like the target isn't being met, blah blah blah, and they give an impression that this news story is, they're not going to do it. The government are incompetent, blah blah blah, and then as soon as that impression is disproved, they move away from it, and they never actually had they never had their hands on the argument, even though they were the ones pushing it forward.
Yeah, they have deniability.
Yeah, I mean they're just unaccountable. Like the way they framed the story was that the government wouldn't meet it. When the government met it, they didn't have to go like, this is a formal apology, sorry we said this.
I don't think even if they were accountable, it wouldn't matter because the news has moved on. Yeah. There's new news. Forget that old news. Who cares? Tests, whatever. Yeah, we've got tests. Big deal.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have to report on it.
They had the whole thing where initially, when the target was met, there was some nitpicking about how
tests was sent out, not tests.
Yeah, it was
done.
They tried to try and still keep the story going in the, like you say, just by re-clarifying what the 100,000 meant exactly. And by trying to spin it as not being a true target hitting, but then like they kept exceeding that target and they kept doing better at it.
Yeah, it was real. They met the target.
Yeah, and that was like that was like 3 days earlier that people were mocking the idea they'd ever meet the target, and then a few days afterwards they completely exceeded it.
Okay, I think that's all I had for coronavirus. Would you like to move on to the Trump impeachment that was also an early year story?
Yeah, there's exactly the same thing where it's built up. I mean, that was built up for like almost 4 years of nothing, brought to a head, completely disproved.
Can you remind me how it works? So I'm an idiot, please. Was it the Senate or the Congress had to vote on it, and then they did vote, and that was the impeachment?
Yeah.
But then being impeached didn't actually mean what everyone thought it meant, and he still got to be president even though he was impeached.
Yeah, I mean, it's an impeachment process. So you're impeached. It's like a court-martial, I think. I'm not sure about this, but like, just because you go to the court doesn't mean you're guilty.
Okay.
It means that your people are going to, you're under investigation, and like you now have to prove, or they have to prove the case against you formally. So I think the Congress can always call an impeachment, and the Senate then runs that impeachment process. So the Senate was controlled by the Republicans, and the Democrats controlled the House. So it was always known that like it was just theatre. Like there was no point in like the senior Democrats at least knew there was no point in impeaching the president because it's never going to progress through the Senate because it's controlled by the GOP, and also it could backfire on them because if they don't have strong evidence, they can't make it look like the Senate are only doing it because Trump's a Republican. So if the Congress had strong evidence and took it to the Senate would really look bad if they didn't push it through. But basically, the Congress had nothing. There was no evidence of anything at all. But I think AOC, who's a bit of a not particularly smart person, made such a big deal out of the fact that Nancy Pelosi wasn't pushing it through. She said like we should impeach him. He's impeachable. We must impeach him. And she kept saying it so loudly that Nancy was embarrassed enough because she was saying it too. The idea is like you know that GIF of the two dogs by the gate. You know, there's two dogs and they're
There's a gate between them, and the gate retracts, and the dogs
they're barking. They're following the gate along as they're barking.
They don't want to get at each other. They just want to bark at each other behind the gate.
As soon as the gate completely opens and they just look at each other, they just sort of like look at each other a second and then like walk off.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is what the impeachment process was that Nancy Pelosi was going like, and Trump was going like that, and it's like they don't want to actually pull the gate down because then they just look silly.
It's kind of like that. I don't know even what it's from, but the joke of like the guy, he wants to be seen to be trying to fight the other guy, but he's saying, "Hold me." He's telling his friend, "Hold me back, hold me back."
Yeah.
Like
So they ended up having to go through with the farce, and they couldn't even get old Black Lives Matter. What's he called? Who's that Black Lives Matter ex-presidential nominee? Romney. They couldn't even get Romney to vote for it, I don't think. Or if he did, it wasn't enough. And it was just like there was just nothing presented during the case that was like anything close to evidence. And this whole thing had been going like not the specific impeachment, but the Russiagate type stuff had been going on for years and years and years.
So it was Russia, and Russia colluded with the the 2016 election and all that, and then this year it became Ukraine.
No, that was.
Or is that Biden?
No, that was like a bizarre like.
I thought it was like Russia, and then the thing they actually tried to impeach him on was this Ukraine call.
Yeah, well, that was quite blatant. Yeah, that was quite ballsy for the Democrats to go for that because it was Biden's son has been up to dodgy stuff in the Ukraine, and he was kind of put there.
Oh right, yeah, it was Biden and it was Trump because Trump was trying to get dirt on Biden's son.
Yeah, well, he did a perfect call. That's what he said.
Is that what he said?
Donald Trump said it was a perfect call, and he just asked them to look into it. Oh, I can't remember what he said. It was like, but then there was a transcript, and then the audio didn't match the transcript or something, and it was really like weak stuff. It was the fact that that Trump might have been withholding government benefits to the Ukraine on the premise that they would investigate one of his political opponents. At that point, he wasn't a definite political opponent, so it was.
I was impeached for making a perfect phone call. There's such a Trumpism. I want to there's so many those like comedy books of like, oh, Trump is an idiot. I want to read like a book of like just Trump's best hits.
Yeah, I mean he's great, but
Maybe I'm Immune. Remember that?
Yeah, that was good. Maybe I'm Immune.
Okay. Yeah, I just think that whole thing is like a big memory hole because they were harping on about Russia for 3 years, and then suddenly, as soon as it became Ukraine, that became the colluding thing, and then once the impeachment went nowhere, just forget it. just forget it. Black Lives Matter. Let's just talk about this now.
Yeah.
Biden, Kamala Harris, whatever. Like the conversation just moves on.
They definitely
Everyone
made-
forgets that there was 3 years of trying to get Trump impeached from Russia,
Yeah,
and
then where it's due, praise where it's due. What's the phrase?
I had it on tip of my tongue and now I've forgotten. Credit,
Credit where it's due. Like the Democrats, like have been lucky or incredibly politically skillful in that none of their really shitty practices have backfired. Like, I thought the impeachment would really backfire on them because they didn't want to do it because it would embarrass them, because they'd be bringing this no evidence in front of everyone and trying to present their very weak case to the wider populace, and it would embarrass them. And it didn't seem to, didn't. I mean, maybe it did hurt because the Democrats lost everywhere apart from Trump. That's a whole different conversation. But yeah, the whole like rioting thing with the Democratic 6 cities were just letting everyone riot. Yeah, that didn't. I mean, it didn't have an impact on the presidential election, apparently. And I can't remember all the other stuff they did. I guess the only thing they didn't do is they didn't manage to dig up any sexual harassment charges for the Supreme Court nomination this time.
Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They managed a few things. I can't remember what they.
Yeah, I don't remember that either. Maybe that was a true memory hole.
They got it through very quickly, the Republicans, but the other one was that was last year though, wasn't it? That whole beer drinking fiasco.
Yeah, he drank whether or not he knew how to drink beer or what.
Yeah.
This is a quick one, and it doesn't give me pleasure to say this, but do you remember the explosion in Beirut that killed 200 people? There wasn't much to say about that.
They were storing chemicals badly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just bad procedures, just the catastrophic consequences of bad management.
Yeah, I mean, like Lebanon is a complete disaster, so it's like it's not particularly surprising something like that would happen.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, that's the kind of news story where I wouldn't expect any follow up. It's not really surprising that there wasn't anything. It's a disaster. What can you say about it?
Well, I mean, nothing really kicked off if that it could be memory hold the fact they're not reporting on it because we don't know about it. Like there might be political consequences internal to Lebanon. It's just that Lebanon hasn't been the top news story. When did that happen? Was that March? Was that before COVID?
That was January.
So it was like before COVID, really.
Yeah. Someone in the chat has brought up one of the last ones on my list, which was I can't say
Soleimani.
Soleimani. He was killed by a drone strike.
Yeah.
And then at his public burial procession in his hometown.
Well, you're missing out one.
In Iraq.
He was assassinated.
Yeah.
Then there was going to be World War III because Trump was a madman.
Yeah, so just to clarify, he was the Iranian head of the military?
No, he was the head of the Al-Quds, which is basically, if you imagine like the Iranian CIA crossed with the Catholic Church, kind of, it's like the special religious military guard. They're meant to specifically protect the revolution, I think is their like constitutional role. So like they basically go out and do whatever they want, and it's usually attack American interests abroad, and just get away with it. But he was meeting with associates in Iraq, and he was targeted. They killed him, and that was seen as like, oh no, Trump's insane. He's going to start World War III. That was like, remember all those memes like, oh, World War III is going to kick off, blah blah blah. Trump's gone too far this time, blah, blah, blah. And then what happened? I think that was it. It was they fired rockets at an American airbase, and it was empty, and they didn't cause any casualties. They caused like one casualty, no deaths. Apparently later it turned out, I'm less sure about this, but I heard that actually there were casualties there and there were deaths, but America didn't report on it to not escalate the situation. They just said that, yeah, they did that thing, and then after that, Iran was like shitting itself because he thought it might get a big attack against it, and a domestic flight was shot down
Oh yeah, yeah.
by Iran accidentally, and then they put their hands up and said, "Oh, we shot that down." I don't know whether
that was such a big deal, wasn't it?
yeah, I mean, at the time it was like, oh my god, like yeah, I mean, this is a again, it's just another thing where the news reported it as this is another thing that Trump has proved himself to be incompetent at. Like he's going to start World War III, and it didn't start anything, and he was restrained, and he managed to kill an important military target for the U.S. military with like minimal casualties and minimal fallout without any kind of escalation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that nothing. Yeah, like the reporting was all like World War III is going to happen, and then when it didn't happen, and it was completely fine. No, nothing. Yeah.
Well, here's the part that I remember. During the funeral procession for Soleimani, 56 people were crushed in a sort of stampede. It was badly organised, something like that.
Yeah.
But the scale of that was similar but larger than the number of casualties, either in the drone strike or in the.
Oh yeah, it was a huge. It was one of the biggest ever like mass casualty events.
So there are many more people who were injured. 56 people died.
Yeah, well, that's what they reported. I mean, it's in Iran, so they get to decide how many people.
Yeah.
Die.
And just as a sort of a running theme for these, it's just I've been thinking about this idea of what is the attention value of a death, and the circumstances of the death. Obviously, it's more interesting or more reportable depending on the cause. You don't report people dying of cancer every year, whatever. But people dying by accident, in an explosion or in a crush or a stampede, or indeed a beheading, as that was my next point, my last point on the list. It's just not as widely reported, or as people just don't have the attention to pay attention to a story like that compared to a police officer killing someone, and especially if someone is, even just one person dying that's caught on video, or even if it's a koala bear crying in a burning forest.
Yeah,
it's like the
visuals. The primary thing that news wants is eyes on the screen. They want people to see it, and what gets people to watch is moving images with audio.
Yeah.
After that, it's still images.
Yeah.
Yeah, and after that, like, who cares? So, the relevance or the importance of the story is completely skewed by footage.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree.
It's also skewed by recent events as well, like heavily skewed. So if there's an airplane crash, a big airplane crash, you'll hear about airplane crashes for the next month. Then there's not like a spike in airplane crashes. It's just that there's more interest in airplane crashes from the general public or from the news, so they report it more.
Yeah. It makes it. You're looking out for a pattern, I guess.
Yeah, it's I don't know, like, if it's a conscious thing for the news reporters doing it, or it's just because like they know that people watch, things they wouldn't usually watch, but they're more interested in those things because of the big event.
Maybe that's what happened in this Paris thing. I mean, do you remember that? This was last year, but a few years ago when Notre Dame, there was a fire at Notre Dame Cathedral.
Yeah.
People were saying, was it started or whatever, and then about a year later, in Nantes, another French city, another cathedral got set on fire, or it was on fire, I should say.
Yeah.
And it seems like a pattern. Two French cathedrals both on fire. I don't know if those two things were related or not, but because they happened, in consecutive years, it certainly seems like a pattern. Anyway, that's a good introduction to this beheading in Paris. And to be honest, I feel a little bit offended, insulted. Maybe that's not the right word, but the fact that I can't remember this guy's name, the guy who was beheaded.
I don't know if it was reported or not.
His name, or maybe not. But it's it's just one of those things.
I know France has like weird privacy rules, or at least like privacy rules that you wouldn't, yeah, we would think weird in sort of like Anglosphere countries.
I don't, it wasn't broadcast on mainstream outlets, obviously, but in a few places, I saw the picture of his beheaded head.
Yeah.
Just lying on the street, and that image is seared into my mind.
Yeah.
But it's just it's not mentioned. It's not brought up. It's just like another casualty on the list of.
Well, I mean, I haven't followed it, but I did hear that it was more big news in France and continued to be big news in France for longer than it was anywhere else.
Well, you'd expect.
And that they were cracking down more, and at least the president was saying more aggressive.
Did you see that they were? It was a week later or so. Maybe it was just like the next day. Someone was projecting images of the Charlie Hebdo cartoons onto the side of a building publicly. That was the last I heard about this. That story is that was a direct response to the beheading. Standing up for freedom of speech in response to what is a kind of, what do you call it, blasphemy laws, the cultural insensitivity, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what else to say, except, it really irritates me that I remember all the names of, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, who was jogging.
Yeah.
Remember his name?
Andre Brie.
Oh, yeah. Don't say that.
Ahmaud
Arbery.
Ahmaud Arbery.
Oh god, I shouldn't laugh. Yeah. People like that. I could name, if you gave me more time, I'd probably name up to 6. But, victims of terror attacks, you just can't even name any.
No, yeah.
Charlie Hebdo, but that was the name of the office, not.
Yeah, not the people involved. Yeah, it's not. It's just. It's again a way that the news can do things, because the news re-reports things, then everyone learns their name, and then they can report the name legitimately as being more important because more people are talking about it.
Well, that's the end of my list of news. Do you have any stories you wanted to cover?
Any
you saw in the chat?
I don't know. If the chat wants to suggest any stories that slipped out of the public consciousness, do it now, or forever hold your peace.
It will forever be memory hold.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Dominic Cummings again? We had a whole stream where we talked all about Dominic Cummings.
Yeah, I mean, he just sort of like
And what are we going to do next?
He just left, didn't he? And it was like,
yeah, on the
left on his own terms, I think.
Yeah, we talked about it on Unpopular Opinions, which is the news stream that I go on, and there was a suggestion that he was going to continue advising Boris Johnson from the shadows, as it were. Like, he was not in an official capacity, but that he would, be on the other end of the phone whenever Boris Johnson needs to talk to him, which I like the idea of that. I don't know if it's likely at all.
I mean, it's not as if Boris Johnson is completely going to cut him out of any.
Well, he obviously values his opinion, so if he gets a text from him, he's going to read it.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's true and not true to some extent. I mean, it'd be impossible to know whether he was in constant contact with him or not. It'd be hard to manage things practically. Yeah, he could give advice, but if you're not there physically and having meetings with civil servants,
well, he's going to need another job to pay his bills, so he can't really spend.
I'm sure he's got
8 hours a day.
Yeah,
you think
I'm sure he's
okay?
fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we've got a super chat, although it's a kind of it seems like it's a kind of private nature. I don't know if I should read it, but talking about the incompetency of the NHS, the risks of contracting coronavirus, the measures that the hospitals are taking that are making it a lot harder to treat every other illness, to stop the spread. It's just one of those things that's going to be. It doesn't get reported on. We'll never know how many people died because of all of these extra measures, extra difficulties in healthcare and in what do you call it, in the private care of the elderly, all that sort of thing. Everything's more difficult now.
Yeah.
And
I mean, COVID completely. I mean, the NHS itself has NICE, which is National Institute of whatever it is, and like
it's funding for.
They run calculations for whether it's worth somebody. They're the death panel that Sarah Palin was talking about.
Mm.
They decide whether people live or die.
Mm.
They go like, this treatment costs this much money and it will provide this many years of extra life, versus spending that money on this, which will provide this many years of extended life to much more people. So you can't get this drug because it's not worth it overall in the balance. They provide that sort of the rationing that you always have to get in a socialised healthcare system.
So some drugs will be covered by the NHS and some won't.
So basically, that's the start. And like the thing is, with COVID, all of that calculation goes out the window. Like I mean, as imperfect as the NICE calculations are, they're at least running off mostly known factors. COVID is like a multiplier or factor that applies to everything. It affects every calculation you make as far as treatment is concerned. Because you go like, okay, this treatment is worth doing. Under normal circumstances, you go, oh, this treatment is worth doing. Now you go like, oh, this treatment is worth doing, but this hospital is in a high contagion area, where under this particular things, we've only got two members of, we've only got two like surgeons that could perform this, and if like one of them died, they're basically not even trying to do those calculations because there's just too many unknowns.
Yeah,
so they're basically,
if you need a treatment and you're not actually dying right at that moment, it can always be put off till later.
Yeah,
and so that's what's happening to a lot of people, is that it's just like, we're in a very settled situation right now. Let's just put your treatment off until next year.
Well, the whole like protect the NHS thing is like, there's a sort of like over fetishization of protecting the NHS, as opposed to like, it's easy to protect the NHS. You just don't send any patients to them, and then the NHS will be fine. But the idea is that the NHS, it's like we dissolve the, I can't remember it.
Fish stew.
No, I'm saying like, it'd be better if the Parliament would dissolve the people and elect another in its place. Like it's like the school would run better if it didn't have any pupils in it, kind of thing. Like, if you're not sending any patients to the NHS, you're going to protect it, but the primary purpose of the NHS isn't to protect itself.
Yeah, but that's what it becomes.
Yeah,
it's a perverse incentive.
Well, it becomes like, that's the trouble with COVID, is that no one knows how bad it is. So all the calculations are based on super risk aversion to COVID, because they don't. That's the way that everyone's calculating everything. That's why masks are being enforced, because COVID is so bad that we must do every single minor thing that's possible to go against it, because we haven't had experience with COVID. We're not used to making calculated gambles like we do with everything else. Like every sort of like car journey, or every license of dangerous drugs or everything, is always like a risk reward balancing thing. And the COVID thing is like, I mean, in like our modern society, we're so risk averse. Nobody wants to be the guy that rolls the dice on giving more people COVID. So everyone is going like, you're getting as somebody in charge of like in middle management at the NHS, you're going to be like, well, if this person dies of cancer, they died of cancer.
No one's adding those up this year.
But if somebody dies of COVID, then it spreads throughout, even if one is far more less likely than the other, they'll be accountable to the COVID deaths, but they won't be accountable to the cancer deaths.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's already in existence that you can compare deaths 2020 to 2019. It's pretty neat because the whole COVID thing took off near the start of the year. It was completely absent throughout all of 2019. So we've got this sort of perfect comparison of a completely COVID-free year. Apparently, some people say there were cases in
Or even if there were definitely
November
not
or whatever.
not significant.
Yeah, well, yeah. So we've got this blank sheet of 2019 to compare to this extremely regulated, this massive pandemic, and we'll just be able to see the deaths per month. How many excess deaths were there, and where were they, and how much of this is sort of due to just random fluctuations. And
I mean, there'll never be. Yeah, people will just argue about it forever.
We'll never know.
The people will take their positions, and that'll be their positions.
I remember about six months ago or more, you said that we're never going to know what the effects of the Brexit are now, because Brexit's happening at the end of this year. Same time as all this COVID stuff. We have no idea. We're not going to know what effect it's going to have on the economy, because you can't disentangle the effects of COVID from the effects of Brexit anymore.
Yeah, you're always gonna. Yeah, people will be able to spin it either way, whether it's successful or not successful. You'll always be able to say, well, it was because of COVID, because COVID had, you can at least rationalise that had a huge effect on everything.
Yeah, it's almost time to go. I have to get out by 9 o'clock because the academic agent is starting his stream at that time. So I encourage you to go over to his channel and watch that if you're still in the mood for watching more of a live stream. Do you think it's worth touching on what we were talking about yesterday about lockdowns and the internet?
Oh, that's a whole subject.
You think that should be its own video?
You can try it.
I'll give you the 2-minute version of what might become a bigger video. It's completely unrelated to the memory hole phenomenon, but I was just hypothesizing that the existence of internet communication, Skype, Facebook, whatever.
Yeah.
It's a requirement for the lockdown. If you can imagine an alternate universe where we didn't have the ability to talk in live time over camera, to work remotely from home at our jobs.
Yeah, it's usually spun the other way. People usually go like, "Oh, it's so great that we've got Teams came online and webcams and fast internet connections are all available now because we'd never be able to deal with the lockdown without it." Or it helped us deal with the lockdown. But you're saying that I think it's a good point, is that potentially we might not have had lockdown if there wasn't a way to mitigate it through the internet.
And if there wasn't a lockdown, if there was nothing we could do because everyone still needs to keep going to work because there's no internet, you can't work from home, you just have to go to work, we have to keep doing it. Maybe they could enforce masks, but I wonder if COVID would even be a story, or if it would just be like, swine flu or bird flu, 10 or so years ago. I remember those. They were stories, but we heard about them. And there was all this news about, don't go near dead birds, that sort of thing. But it wasn't anywhere near this scale because, I know it was different. I'm not saying it's the same. But I wonder if it would be on that scale instead of on this scale.
I think it's really more, I mean, COVID's probably worse than all those things. I think if there wasn't, I think the issue now is that it's marginally possible to have lockdowns. So there's an argument about the extent of the lockdown. Like if you say in the counterfactual where we didn't have webcams and we didn't have Amazon and we didn't have all this infrastructure.
So click and collect.
Yeah, we didn't have all this infrastructure that enabled you to not leave your house, then there wouldn't be a decision to be made. It wouldn't be like, oh, should we shut down shops? Should we do this? It'd be like, we can't shut down shops because people just die of starvation. So we're not shutting down shops. And so it'd just be a case of just reporting on how many cases there were and how we were treating them, and like
Yeah.
recruiting people into sort of like drafting people into the NHS or whatever, like stuff that you could do, because we have these different levers. They're pulling on those levers because those levers are available to
But
pull.
the thing is, so much of the conversation is about the levers. So, which makes me wonder how much conversation would there even be if there was no decision to be made? Maybe it would just be
Well,
forgotten.
the decisions would be pulled back into the areas where they could be made. So it'd be like, oh, should we get every single able-bodied teenager from like 15 to 19 drafted into a medical emergency NHS squad? Because they're not working, and they're mostly immune, or the thing that'd be the kind of thing you'd be talking about. It wouldn't be talking about it'd be conversations about like, should elderly people be allowed outside? Should people be going around delivering and stuff like that? Should fat people be allowed outside? Stuff like that. If it's true how like skewed towards certain demographics it is, then that would be the only levers you could pull. But now we've got levers that enable the government to say that nobody can go outside or nobody can go to these particular places and congregate, because life is manageable, if not pleasant, without those things.
Yeah, I think it's that's my point. The manageability is making it possible. It makes it manageable. That's kind of a tautology, but
yeah,
maybe I'll have a more organised version of that discussion later. But thank you for joining us on the memory hole, and I hope this becomes a yearly tradition. We'll see.
Is there more chats you want to read?
You tell me. There's quite a lot of chat going on.
It's 9 o'clock we've got until, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got 7 more minutes. I didn't see nothing caught my eye, but
yeah, I mean, I think there will. Queen Boudica Radiant says there will be a blast of the media for a new COVID strain every year.
yeah.
I think that's inevitable. This will be, for the next 20 years, there'll be at least scare stories about new flu strains and new coronavirus strains in the news, whatever it is, because we got that beforehand. Like every 3 or 4 years, there was a minor scare story about SARS or about swine flu. Those are like the press tried to hype up and it ended up petering out. Now the same kind of things that appear, that have always been appearing, will be seen in the context of like, oh, this could end up being like this.
It was exactly what we were saying about the cathedral fires and plane crashes. It puts everything into a new context after this.
Yeah, there will definitely be more sort of like travel restrictions on like China and India and wherever countries where this stuff is first reported. Because at the start of this year it was seen as incredibly extreme to be stopping travel from any particular, just blanket saying like, if you come from this country you can't come in. I think that would just be the norm now for any places where it's reported as there's a new strain of something appearing.
I think maybe this is a bleak note to end on, but I wonder, we've broken the habit of shaking hands and hugging and kissing when we meet each other, not you and I, but people in general, which I love, by the way. I hated all of that ritual of hugging. Like when you meet women,
I think
hugging women.
I think the elbows thing is worse.
People aren't actually doing that though. I've never seen anyone do that.
You don't know, like things start off as like cringe, and then everyone's doing it, and then
I just wonder. Maybe handshakes aren't coming back. Maybe we'll never be hugging.
Yeah. I don't think it'd be. I mean, it's an invitation to look foolish to predict the future, but
yeah,
I think things will return to mostly normal in the next 18 months.
All right.
But, I think the cinemas will reopen. People will go back to restaurants, because people,
Look, I'm not saying restaurants, those are great. I'm saying, look, the only reason that we shook hands in the first place, it was a habit thing. It's like a social thing. It's like
it's a friendly, physical contact is like, that's not going away.
Okay, all right. Maybe you like handshakes more than I do. I never saw the point. I thought it was just a social ritual that had no, What was that guy on YouTube saying? It was like it was a signifier that was now signifying nothing. Yeah, the original meaning of the gesture was I'm not holding anything in my hand. You know, I'm not going to shoot you with my hand.
What was the,
I'm not going to stab you. I'm not holding anything in this hand.
yeah,
Now it's just like
the Roman one was like that.
Yeah.
To look for knives in there.
Yeah.
Apparently, but no, I think it's I think you hear about studies about like physical contact. Like people really need that.
Yeah.
Like it's a real like brain hack as far as like meeting a new person. It's like
touching them like they're here.
At work and stuff like that. When I've met new people during the COVID thing, it's like I have shook the hand and they've shook my hand too, and it's like whoops.
Oh really? That's interesting. I haven't shaken anyone's hand in like almost a year.
Yeah,
no, we shake hands. Look, I work in the male environment. We shake hands.
You're forced to.
Yeah.
You don't have the instinct to do it.
Well, you're right. I don't. You're right. You're absolutely correct. I don't know if it's because I'm a woman or it's just a different thing, but
yeah.
I definitely feel awkward every single time I have to shake someone's hand. And I'm like,
Yeah, because women shouldn't shake hands.
Okay. You want to shake hands with me? Which is a good way to end the stream. People are probably getting withdrawal symptoms, not shaking hands with people. They don't even know what one looks like anymore. You want to do the Roman one? Yeah. Alright. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Go ahead and wait for the academic agent and his chat. Well, he's probably going to be late, but you can all have a nice conversation while you're waiting. And Happy New Year!
Oh yeah, well. Did you say Happy New Year before Happy New Year?
Yeah, it's like it's in every like Christmas card. Is Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Is there a formal thing where you're not meant to say Happy New Year before it's New Year?
Break a leg.
Or do you say that between Christmas and New Year?
I think you say it all through December.
By January, you don't say it January 1st?
No, you say it January 1st. You can't say it any time after that.
Okay.
I'd say, don't say it January 2nd. Don't think you're a weirdo. It's already the New Year, idiot. Okay. Happy New Year, everyone.